7 months ago, when I asked my former students to come to Bois Boucher to do a workshop, and we explored the idea of the book as module, a place where individual people with different personalities, different backgrounds, from poets to scientists to artists to fiction writers, could compress their intellects, their minds, into a module called a book. They produced this I thought, very successful project to contain, to play with the idea of a reading room, the idea of nature and technology, the idea of the grid that goes ungrid-like in terms of tree branches, because tree branches were very available on the site. And so we have the ordered grid on one side, and then nature on the other side as this kind of oppositional force. So the idea is the trees relate to the idea of making paper and layering. So they produced this reading space, this reading room, this library, and then we all left. This was a 5-day workshop. They then dispersed. One person went to Paris, another to Los Angeles, several in New York City. So when Tito and Christoph and Burkhart invited us to continue the project, we met the people in New York City, came to my apartment in New York City, and we sat down and we started to brainstorm. If we were to continue this project, if we wanted to, what are we talking about here? They took on this project on their own and completely developed it by themselves. And I'm really proud of the results, because I think subtly it still keeps the spirit of the project we did at Bois Boucher. However, it's developed very differently in a lot of ways. So instead of being literal about the relationship of the tree to the page to the book, I think there's a lot more abstraction happening, a lot more subtlety in the new piece that they've developed for Milan. So parts of this project were built in Milan through sending drawings across the world to a fabricator in Milan to fabricate component parts. Some of the pieces were made in Los Angeles, and one of the former students from Paris collected all the books and hand carried them to Milan and covered them. And the branches, which are made out of tubes, acrylic tubes, were made in New York City, sandblasted there, taken apart as a set of modules, put into suitcases, and hand carried to Milan 2 days ago. So I think conceptually it's developed a lot in its subtlety and its ambiguity between, nature and technology, mathematics and randomness, and all of those plays, which is all about the difference between personalities, the scientific mind versus the artistic mind. This is more or less a model, more a prototype, but you could add these together and create an entire environment of, if you imagine 30 of these stacked, and that's why you'll see the negative and positive relationship, so that you could add on more and more of them. You could reverse them and turn them backwards, and so it's interchangeable. So it's really underplayed, it's very subtle, it kind of glistens and glows and vibrates. There's a little vibration in the branches, the stainless steel, the translucency of the plastic, the whiteness of the plastic laminate, the layers of the plywood. That for me is really exciting to see. And I think it really makes that big leap forward from what we did at Bois Boucher. I think for myself, I cross boundaries between fine arts and applied arts. So for me, the use of the module is somewhat more abstract. I think of it as a framework. So if I'm, for instance, working two-dimensionally and I'm working on a blank canvas as a frame space, I set up a system, whether it's 10 inches by 10 inches, and I accrete those and I build using those images and create this kind of grid overlay over organic space, for instance, or over the idea of spirituality or the non-physical, but it's always referenced by the superimposition of the grid. So I think that's not so true. I think even people who work in fiction and literature and the fine arts are very interested in boundaries and setting up systems through which they can use to create irrationality. So in a way, there's a counterpoint between rationality and irrationality that I think plays together in relationship to each other somehow. I'm not sure I'm being very clear, but it's that module, I think, creates irrationality and spontaneity, and I desperately need it because there's too many possibilities in the world, and without some system to organize myself, I'm all over the place and I'm very flaky and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I need to have some boundaries in my life and in my work, and that's what I would call as kind of an abstraction of the idea of modularity.